again, a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for making the choice to be here and join us for this community online exploration today. Excuse me. Today with Dakotah from Cohere, and we'll introduce you properly in a moment. A bit of cacao in my throat. So yeah, I'm super happy to see you all, and knowing from the last conversations how beautiful it always has been, how connecting and how insightful. We've been always exploring the topics that have somehow been on the edge of community building, or somehow taking us also into uncomfortable territory. I remember conversations, for example, with Danny Bell on gentrification and the shadow of community. And today I'm really excited to have Dakotah, who also just met this January at Lake Atitlan, but it feels like we've known each other for much longer. And so I'm really eager to dive into this conversation, especially because Dakotah has some really badass shit going on with his project Cohere, and really working on some very practical, very potentially large scale structural solutions for impacting the world that we're living in towards a direction that we want to see in the world. And I've been holding this vision of a nomadic community for about 2 years now. Since I arrived in Costa Rica for the first time, I felt so called to create a network of communities that are somehow allowing us to go wherever we are in the world, regardless of having ownership in these places, but owning it all together. And Dakotah just presented me with this idea of like, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. So I'm super fascinated to have him here, but mostly also to dive into the things that are still not clear for you, that you are sitting in the question with. So that is also part of the format that we're having here, that we're not presenting the experts who have all the answers, but that we're creating a space for conversations where we're in the question together and realize that community is something that we all need to learn ourselves, or learn again. Maybe there was a time when we knew better, but yeah, having these spaces has always been very beautiful. And I'm here with Alex, who's co-hosting this format with me since the beginning. So maybe Alex, you want to share a few words as well?
Yeah, I think it's just every time we've done this, we've always ended up at some pretty deep levels. And so it's kind of an open exploration of where we're going to go and where we're going to land. And it's also an invitation, like there'll be space at the end for you guys to share reflections and ask questions as well. So really thinking about like, what are the edges of your understanding of community and where would you like to explore? Yeah, and we use community in the large sense. It's not just eco villages, it can be any type of community. So just to keep that in mind.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, and with this, I'd love to hand it over to you, Dakotah, and maybe you want to introduce yourself and share a bit about your passion for community and the things that you're working on very practically.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm already noticing my cheeks are really sore from smiling. It's really good to be here with you all. And yeah, I think the thing that most excites me in being part of this movement that we're all part of is how tangibly we're all holding this vision, and we all have the vision. And one of the things that's really important to me is how can I be of support to practical steps to move it along, and moving along the meta network. And yeah, so my background's in architecture. I trained at the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture. I had I started studying architecture formally when I was a young child because I had speech impediments. And my practice, I was very spoiled in my practice, and I was able to do, really bougie, crazy, high-end projects. Ultimately got present to that does not make the world a better place at all. And the last thing we need are more shitty or nice, but oversized homes. And really just the shift in my practice and how to use architecture for social impact. And from that, even from like the really great projects we were doing, really found that the impact of those projects were very limited, and we're helping a handful of people. But what I got present to is the economics, and how do we address the fundamental underlying economics of the system? And if we can help make progress there through access to equity and in creating a new type of commons, that we can then help accelerate the movement. And so right prior to Cohere, I was working for the Foundation for Humanity, project managing a $25 million real estate development near the biospheres in southern Arizona. And Rennie Davis, who is the chairman of that, unfortunately and very unexpectedly passed away. And that's was when he did pass away is when it really sparked our thinking. Instead of doing the one shiny development or the city on the hill, how do we again get into the economics to help create a decentralized network and help spur on 1,000 regenerative communities? And so that's like was the impetus between for Cohere. And then a week after Rennie's passing, we moved to Lake Atitlan and just put our heads down and started working full time on Cohere proper. And the biggest thing is for us, the decentralized equity. So we build out a commons was a really incredibly important step. And so, when we started this a few years ago, one of the things that others in the space were saying is, why would you deal with compliance? And early on, we decided we need to be compliant with the SEC. We took on a unique stance, or not unique, but we took on a stance that regulation will come down hard on crypto. It's only a matter of time. And so instead of avoiding it, how do we go into the belly of the beast and be in compliance so that we didn't want to take the risk of putting all of our money into this, nor other people's money, if there was ability for a regulator to come in and change a law and just totally mess up the business. So that's what we did. We put together a way to decentralize our equity so that anytime a member contributes, they gain equity in the entire network. And in this way, we start to realign incentives so that every single person, when they put in energy, they're getting value. They're getting direct equity, direct ownership of actual securities, of actual shares in the company that are on chain. So we have liquidity, and that we realign the incentives so we all become direct owners. And then we all have an incentive to help other communities. We all have an incentive to hire each other. We all have a financial reward when we steward the land. And so this is what we built out, this owner membership model that we've been calling dynamic equity. We spent a year developing out the back end, then we went through Techstars and Accelerator, and now we're launching our online community portal and bringing together 250 change makers, people who are also holding this vision and are just kicking ass already in their zone, and then beginning to operate locations around the world and also finance a few developments from scratch. So we just put down money on a property in Ecuador. We're buying an existing dairy operation. And then we're lining up funds for a large piece of land here, Lake Atitlan, and a Polish castle, and a cool partnership with the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture in Montana, and just Ange and Kyle's Dominican Republic Coral Restoration Project. Like we're lining up these really sweet from scratch developments and then networking existing facilities. So yeah, there's a lot at once, but yeah, that's like kind of a brief overview of where I'm coming from and where we're at now. And yeah, again, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, the more I hear about the project, the more I'm fascinated how much it aligns with my vision, and not only all the technical aspects that you have figured out already, but also from the first conversation that we had, I could immediately feel your heart in this, of how passionate you are about this and how much you're coming really from a place that is not attached to your ego, but really coming from a big heart for humanity and creating a more beautiful world. So yeah, I feel very honored to have you here with us. And since we're such a small group, the format that we have is that we usually dive in for half an hour with you and then open up for more questions. But maybe we can have a brief introduction for everyone, that you at least present yourself with your name and one word, what's alive for you right now, and one word in regards to your intention for being here. So if I take the start, my name is Jonathan and I feel excited, and my intention for today is curiosity. And I pass it on to Thomas. What is your name? What is your one word that describes what's alive in you, and one word for your intention?
Yeah, my name's Thomas. What's alive in me? I guess the nature around me. It's my intention. Yeah, I like this word coherence. I'll go with that. Find some coherence.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
I'll pass it on to Matthew.
Hey there. Good morning. Matthew, yes, that's my name. And going to cheat a bit. The thing that's calling to me is finding the others, and then yeah, alchemy. Alchemy is the word. And I will pass it to Alex.
Sorry, something just beeped on my phone. I'm Alex. What's alive in me right now is just like I'm just looking at like beautiful nature in front of me and appreciating the magic of Costa Rica. And my intention for today is exploration. I will pass it to Sha.
So I'm Charlotte, or Sha for short. Today I feel happy, and my intention for today is connection. And I will pass it to Alden.
Hi, my name is Alban. My intention for today, it's always hard for me to choose. I'm very indecisive, but I will go with friends. Friends. Yeah, I feel very good to know some of you and yeah, to see you. And I pass it to Emmanuel.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Emmanuel, or Manny for short. And yeah, my intention would be interconnection. And very happy to be here. I've been invited, and I'll pass it to Ines.
Hey, sorry, my internet is very bad. So yeah, I feel a little bit shy now. And yeah, I'm here with the intention for connecting, and I'm curious. Goodbye. Hello. Next.
Sorry, our internet just broke down. Somehow chose the wrong day for an online call. But yeah, you want to go next?
I'm Brina. What's alive for me is aliveness, feeling very alive today. And yeah, curiosity. And I'm sitting in the background only because we only have one chair in this house, but I'm here.
Dakotah, do you want to introduce yourself with one word for each?
Joy.
All right, so let's get this conversation started. I primed you briefly, Dakotah, that we're diving into these questions that we still don't have an answer to. Is there anything that comes to your mind that you would like to elaborate on, something that you haven't figured out with all the answers that you've already found to the global challenge that you're working on, or the small and local challenges that come from that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, one of the things for Cohere is that we're constantly trying to limit our scope. The thing that we're, building is the one model for member-owned community infrastructure. And what we're after is housing the change makers and the people who already have been working their lives in the different subsections of how things can be optimized for coherence, for community living, for you name it. And so I feel like, yeah, there's so many things that we don't have figured out. And one of the key things for us is, because we're member owned and we're out to be member built, we want to actually, anything that we don't know, we want to put to the community and create more and more opportunities for people to garner equity for bringing their wisdom to the network. And so some of the things that we're really, working on right now actively is about to launch this online community. So, how do we create really meaningful engagement on an online community and like have do that in a coherent way and, and get people really connected from the individual projects and the new projects. That's one thing that's really alive. And the other thing is, how to create templates for when we bring people together in a new location. What is that way to create the coherence, build the trust field, and to create the space to collaborate that can be replicated and prototypical. So those are just a couple of things amongst many that there were an inquiry around.
Beautiful. Wow. Yeah, and I have so much admiration for you figuring out, the hard problems of how do you make it compliant with the financial authorities and all these things, and building the legal infrastructure and building the technological infrastructure, and having walked that path already to the degree that you have. But then what I hear from you sharing is, how do you make the soft problems, work? And that's a lot of the things that we've been talking in our last conversations, how challenging it actually is to live in community, how challenging it is actually to subordinate our egos towards our bigger hearts and our desires to really live in a more beautiful world, how easy it is to get hijacked by our small selves, so to speak. And so I hear that also through the words that you're saying, that is, nothing that can be so easily standardized, but that is always a unique process that involves the messiness of being human. And at the same time, how can we make it easier? How can we develop these templates that make it more likely to succeed?
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, then it's like really comes down to like, what is in my point of view, what is the evolution of what it means to be human? And one of the things that's really key for us is like, be the change, live the change. And there's like in my opinion, there's some architectural things that in co-living, in my opinion, it's very important that each person has their private space and then shared common space. So you always have the ability, especially for introverts, to fully retreat, fully have privacy. But then there's, as you're talking to, the importance of us changing ourselves and evolving our awareness. And so one of the things we've been doing is seeking the acupuncture points. Like we're looking at raising capital with John Milton in Crestone, Colorado. He's an important elder with the Way of Nature Foundation. And the work he's been doing for 60 years is how do you change yourself through a deeper relationship with the earth? And so it's really been fun to like see where these wisdom holders, indigenous to contemporary to avant-garde, that we can then cross-pollinate, and then all of the people who are involved in co-creating this and co-owning this, we can share best practices on how do we change ourselves so that we can be a global community and get in right relations with the earth and continue to evolve.
I'm wondering, because like one of the things that I've noticed in some of like the community projects is there's almost like a community washing happening, where it's like it's like a real estate development project with the word community put on top of it, and then there's not a real sense of that how that is actually going to happen. It's almost like A plus B and we'll have community. Like if we build a house, people will be in community, and I don't think it actually works like that. So I'm wondering, like, when you guys are working with projects or within yourselves, like how are you really finding the places that are really doing that, and how do you do that for yourselves as well?
Yeah, I think that one of the best examples of this, of like community washing, is Andrew Newman, who just opened a $360 million round after like the whole fucking We Live debacle. And yet he's able to raise 360 million, the largest A16 investment ever, after everything that's happened. But like, I think that's a really good example of community washing to the max. I would say for what we've been testing the last few years as we've been doing prototypical runs is because we've been hosting and facilitating communities now for the last year and a half, pushing 2 years now. And I don't know, but the things that seem to be working well for us at least is superordinate goals. That superordinate goals and having a skin in the game and stake. So it's like oftentimes in intentional communities, you have someone who comes and builds out a food forest and they put in a ton of sweat equity and they maybe have subsidized rent, but they are directly increasing the value of that property. In a time, in my opinion, call it climate change, call it earth rebalancing. The climate is radically changing. One of the most important things, in my opinion, is access to food. So you build out a self-sufficiency, you are directly increasing the value of that property. And yet there's really generally no mechanism where someone gets the value of increasing the value of that property. And that creates all sorts of like really terrible like codependency things where someone does, and then like there's get patriarchal power structures and something shifts and someone has to leave and they just put 10 years of labor in, but they don't get the return for that. So to me, it's like the two things we've been experimenting again is the co-ownership. Everyone is able to take that equity and value with them wherever they go. So there's freedom. And the second piece is the superordinate goal. And that's the values. And like the research around like gangs, one of the best things to get gangs to move beyond that way of being is getting, especially for kids or teenagers, getting them aligned on something more important. And to me, that's a really incredibly important thing is having intentionality. And so the properties we're knitting together all have an intention and if we can generate a consciousness that we're in a beautiful, amazing time in humanity right now where we can leapfrog, but we can only do it if we come together, then I think that is a really critical piece. Those are two things that we've been experimenting with, but I think it's obviously way, way more complex than that. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest in that for me, and many things are clicking together. And I think bridging the values and the ownership structures can be a powerful link, because I see a lot of people in community doing a lot of work around creating, community on a cultural level, but somehow lack the structural foundation. And then oftentimes it creates these breaking points. If someone wants to leave and, then it creates a culture clash or conflict, because what do they do with all the time that they invested in it? So I think it's a really smart solution to have the possibility to take your value that you created with you and have this identity of a larger global organism that you're contributing to. So I think that's a super beautiful way of, creating a community that is bigger than just our small eco village, but really like, no, we're a huge human family that we're connecting with. So I think that's very beautiful. And yet, knowing from my experience of traveling to different places how challenging it can be to be on the ground. So I think what you're saying about living the example is so crucial. And I love how you're holding this desire of let's have everyone contribute. And at the same time, I know that community also attracts people who not only come from a place of fullness, but have a certain projection on community that it will fill their cup and that it'll fill their lack, and that's why they want to be in community. So I'm curious to see how you're curating the people who are joining and making sure that they actually contributing with the skills that they have to contribute to maintain a certain level of quality. I'm wondering if there's anything that you have in place for that, or what your thoughts are on this. Because wanting everyone to contribute is beautiful, and knowing that, people have different capacities to actually contribute.
100%. Because one of the things that a friend of mine and I was giving him an update and he was giving me some feedback yesterday. He's like, he's an amazing entrepreneur and he's working like we all are, just crazy hours. And he's like, I don't really care to contribute to Cohere. Like, I'm running my company. I want to grow my network. I want to be in a really incredible place with people. And he's like, once I drop in and connect, then maybe I want to contribute. So it's interesting. I don't think he's necessarily our target demographic, but that was an interesting thing for us to like really see where that filtration process is. And there's the green memes, of course, where there's like a lack of wholeness, and then you're looking for wholeness outside of yourself. And it's like, if only I had this, if only I had the other person, am I going to feel whole and complete? And we're all going through our evolution. I mean, like, I've got infinite things that in my self-improvement journey. But the goal for us at Cohere is to scale slowly, to really like call in the people that, I don't know how to put it, just have their shit together and are like, doing like, I kind of like this from the landmark pedagogy of like in their communication series, like if you're only thinking about yourself, you're only this big. And then you start thinking about your family, you're this big, and then your community, and then your world. And like the more your awareness is on your relationship to the whole, the bigger an entity you are. And that always really landed for me. And so, yeah, that's something that's just really key is how we filter, how we bring in the right people, how we're really clear with our messaging, which is right now super outdated, but we're in the process of a big launch. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really know how we do that effectively. But one thing I do feel really strongly about is I think a lot of people jump the gun with building permanent compounds. It's like, we're gonna get a bunch of our homies together and we're gonna build out an intentional community or a village. To me, that is super not practical. I think it's much, much more important. I think it's really critical to date for a while, come co-work, co-live for a few months, vibe each other out, see, is this guy pissing all over the toilet seat? And, we just have a different way of being. Okay, cool. Before you then put down roots and build permanent accommodations. And so Cohere is very much like an incubator, if you will, for longer term developments. The properties that we're investing in have massive potential to build out entire villages. But for us right now, for the next few years, it's shorter term stays. People pop around the world, get to know each other, and we consistently grow the trust field. There are some other interesting plugins of around having a badge, like an NFT badge, if you will, like Sapien Network were some of the first ones to develop this, where you, as a member, you have like a profile where you can kind of log on chain the different programs you're doing. So, like you can, like if you do an inner development work program that just builds your rapport potentially, there's some interesting things there. There's Susan Brown, who's got like a crazy, like one of the world's preeminent biofeedback devices, where like our members could like, we're discussing our members having preferred access to like this super state-of-the-art biofeedback device. So there's lots of different ways. I don't know, but I'm really excited to hear your guys' thoughts on how we do this.
I would say I'm really honored to be part of this discussion. I've been having chills since the beginning of the discussion. It's really the first time I meet someone, and I'm honored, Dakotah. I'm working on building an ecosystem, which is, I would say, you really, really described it well by describing Cohere. So I would say the vision is really aligned, and we're building an ecosystem based on how can we make sure that everyone has the basic necessities for life, meaning without having to struggle, right? So in the past 300 years, we've done so much work on getting more efficient with everything, right? And every time we build a new machine, we become more efficient. We used to build roads with people and shovels. Now we have machines to do that. So instead of 20 people to build the road, we need only 3 people to build the road. But where does that efficiency go? It always go to just a minority of people. And the reason why is because the way we've structured our economic structures. By design, we're conducing wealth to a minority of people. So what we're trying to do and what we're doing with Fractal Ecosystem is we're building a new economic structure that is redistributing wealth in a different fashion. So everyone can partake into the increasing of the efficiencies. And when it comes to shelter, because we're having a whole, so we're having also investors coming in and creating a community of investors, and it's not a community of place per se. We're honing in on Costa Rica, but our investors are mainly from France, Europe, Canada, North America, and Costa Rica. And that's why I think we're building like parallel structures. So it's very interesting. And what resonated with me is when I think you were speaking about contributions by alignment. So when we have visions that align, how can we make sure that our structures adhere to one another and create networks? So, because we could talk about the how of our projects, but I think that would steer the conversation a bit away from this format. But what I would be interested about into steering the conversation towards is how, when we find other people that have the same visions, and how can we make sure that our alignment come together, and that our networks can come together also by helping each other, building the same visions we all have. So it's an open question.
I would like to bounce on that as well, because I think one of the big problem is how do we find coherence. So like I've seen so many projects that try to basically do the same thing, and they all try to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's eco-villages, sometimes it's collaborative platforms, but they just try to all do the same thing instead of joining forces. And I think that's like one of the biggest thing is like, how do we make a whole coherent whole and work on the same thing together instead of being fractured. Yeah.
100%, I totally agree. I think the practical way is we need to all get together for a couple months and just hash through this stuff. So maybe we do that at Rat Park in April and May. But yeah, no, I think that's such an important piece of like what are the practical ways that we combined our forces. I was just talking to a fund manager out of Switzerland before this call who wants to create White Rock. Instead of Black Rock, how do we create White Rock that's member owned? Like BlackRock now owns 10% of the world. Time for us to do the member-owned version to build out regenerative community rather than shopping malls. And I think that we do that when we like just have tangible ways of, like for us, it's we want every sister org to become a shareholder in this. We want everyone to co-own Cohere. And then what happens is then anytime we grow the whole, it grows our position. Every sister org now is getting the benefit. And so equity swapping and indexing our tokens, I think, is a very specific way that we can do that. And that becomes very, very exciting. And that's what we're discussing with a housing manufacturer right now, an international developer, the Bloom network, like Build Cities, like all these that we can now create an index fund together of, and then totally directly equity swap. So that we all have that line incentive, but ultimately just like breaking bread and narrowing our scope. And that's where like with us is like Cohere, anytime we can send energy to a sister org that's doing something already, great. And we just continue to build the ecosystem by getting special with what we do well. So those are just a couple thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. That question kind of brought to mind what I was already putting together in my brain, which was like, I'm hearing this as like some of the structures that you're working with are like Techstars, like venture capital, even like some of the foundations, I would say, are a bit coming from this like old way of being SEC compliant, all of that. And you're trying to move into this new way of being. And I think the same sort of question that Emmanuel is asking, like, it's not really about the how in my, like what I've seen. It's more about the like, how do we as individuals actually shift into this new way of being, where everything we do is community, where our brand isn't the most important thing, where our investors aren't the most important thing, and the act of being in community is the most important thing. And so, yeah, it's an interesting piece of like, and I think we're all in our own ways navigating this, like we grew up in a certain mindset and we're trying to drop it away, but it's still present for us, you know? So how do you on like a personal level navigate that sort of interplay of being part of this world and moving into this other world and kind of being this bridge piece between them?
Yeah, our consultancy is called Bright Bridge. And we really believe, like a mentor once told me, that if you're ahead of your time, you're relevant. And like a critical thing for us on the practicality side is how do we, I think it's, for me, I don't subscribe to like burn the old world down or ignore the old world. To me, that I've met executives of the big five oil companies that are mean well as individuals, but they're part of a totally fucked ecosystem and economy. And I think not making anyone wrong, but creating a bridge to a better world that is just far more practical. And so it's like, it was interesting with Techstars. Initially with Techstars, we're like, that's so game A, we would never do Techstars. And then the Anywhere program reached out to us and were like, no, you guys should apply. And we're like, well, that's okay. And so we did like a total half-ass application, and they came back to us and were like, no, we want you in this program. And we're like, okay. And then we went into it, and then we realized how prestigious Techstars is, and it was extremely valuable. I mean, they schooled us left, right, and center on everything. And that world of venture capital, we're not interested in venture capital at all. But to have the opportunity to meet with 40 different venture firms and say no to that entire model was extremely enlightening in terms of how we build a bridge and how we're relevant to that system. What we're doing with tokenizing our securities solves an endemic problem in venture capital, and that is there's no liquidity. Every shareholder wants the company to be bought out in order to get their money back. And so everyone's incentivized to sell out to the monopoly. And that's murdering our planet, to be very frank. And so if we're not aware of where the trillions of dollars are, then we can't practically build a bridge to anything. And so it's been a really interesting balancing act for us to like try to see like how do we tap that world and then bring the funnel of old money into new systems, in new ecosystems, and then just be of service to that. So like that to me is like on the business side. On the personal side, it's just a matter of like, for me, it's like really, I'm really a big fan of parts theory. And I don't believe we have an ego, but we have a series of subpersonality typologies. And so it's just an ever endless daily practice of like realigning to my center, to my authentic self, and just be in my daily routine to just be in my center. And then create community around me of people who are aligned to continuing to evolve their awareness through just daily practice. So, and then breaking bread. Yeah, that's how I view it.
Yeah, it's often like so much simpler than we think, but also really complicated to constantly be aware of our own stories and our own inconsistencies, but also holding that in like kindness, because we're not meant to be perfect.
We're not judging ourselves for what we do that's crazy and stupid. Just like see it all as the growth opportunity that it is. I don't mean to get, to me, this is like the meat of it is like how we grow as human beings and do the inner work and, share the different modalities and practices that are working for us, and let's all get our own experience. And then have the way to share what works well with a super organization.
I think one of the biggest dichotomy is how to bridge the gap between building the individuals, and when you have more solid individuals, you have more solid community, and back and forth, right? Because we need the two. For me, it's not having strong individuals, but all separate won't work. And having communities that they're in their own small bubbles and they're fine, but well, all of the rest of the world, let's say, goes to shit, that won't work either. So I think we need to learn to bridge the two, and those two dichotomies, and build commons. And then while you're building the commons, you're reinforcing the individuals. And while you're building, and while the individuals can stop to be in this survival mode all the time, they start to do the shadow work. Because if you're in survival mode, you don't have time for anything, absolutely anything. You're surviving. That's it. That's all. So once you can get out of that mode, I think it is where the real work of human beings start, let's say. And for us, this is like the game we've chosen to play is really an infinite game. You were talking about exits, right? Like it's the prevalent mode of building a structure and then exiting and selling to a bigger conglomerate. I think that model is broken. And we have to start building for infinite games more. And when you're playing an infinite game, the goal of the game is not to win or to exit. The goal of the game is to continue playing the game, right? So if like we're starting Fractal Ecosystem in order for children and the children of our children to be able to play that game, if that makes sense. So it's a intergenerational view of the like a continuum that and a legacy that we're going to leave for our children and for the next people that are going to be coming.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It's yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah.
I have a question. I love this idea of co-ownership and shared equity and shared value, like the example that you gave in the beginning of the person who plants the vegetable garden and increases the equity of the location in that way. And I'm wondering how that tokenized system, or whatever the system is, assigns different value to different things. I had started a network like 10 years ago called Cultural Freelancers United. And the idea was that we would trade services rather than having an economic system. And it got us kind of into a rabbit hole of how much each person's work is worth. Is an hour worth an hour, whether you're doing graphic design or business consultancy? You know, is my ceremony worth a vegetable garden? Because I don't really have the skills to do the things that would increase the equity of a location in that classical way, but I can bring together the group nervous system. And so how do we put a value on the different pieces that each person brings?
So I feel a very good way to do that is to evaluate how everyone value the contribution. So if, for instance, if someone created a piece of something or did some work, then after we all vote, you know, like, and we all attribute how much it was worse. So this way, because, you know, I don't know if 1 hour is worth 1 hour, you know, like, but it's really about the contribution. And so, yeah, I think like that's the best way to evaluate and reward people accordingly.
That's an interesting thing to think about, because the way we value things is actually our values. And a lot of like our economic systems, for example, like mothers caring for children has been unpaid labor, and that intrinsically embeds a cultural value that like that experience is less than, right? So it's really interesting because it gets to like the details of like whether you're conscious of it or not, you're going to demonstrate what is the most important. So yeah, I don't have the answer, just thinking about that.
When thinking about those things, my mind always go to a brilliant economist that was named Bernard Lietaer, and he was outlining how the prevalent economic system really has one big design for its monetary system. There's only one design, right? Like the fiat monetary system we all use can be like US dollars, Japan yen, or Costa Rican colon. It's all the same design, and it's an extractive design. It's not bad, it becomes bad. Like it's very efficient, right? It was built for efficiency. And the analogy he would give is like if you have a pine forest, it's really efficient for growing biomass, but don't drop a match because it'll burn. You won't have a forest anymore. If you look at the jungle, not as much as efficient, but way more resilient. So his point was we need a plurality of different currencies and currency designs, right? So when we think about exchanges within a community, it's different from exchanges between communities, which is different from exchanges at a national level, which is different from international level. So we can have a plurality of designs that are interoperable and can stack on each other, right? So if we use, let's say, the US dollar for international exchanges, it's all fine. That's a design that was meant to do that, but it wasn't meant for an exchange between someone caring for someone else's daughter while I go for supper with my wife, right? So it wasn't meant for that. It's not built for that. So I think we need like a plurality of different currencies. Like if you have, for example, time currency, right? So 1 hour of my time is worth 1 hour of your time. Well, that works on inside a community, and it's related to the Dunbar's number a lot, right? So so smaller than 150 people, because you have a relationship and you have trust with the people with whom you exchange your time. It's hard to exchange your time with someone you don't know across the globe, right? So this is where you start losing the value, because when you give 1 hour of your time to your neighbor, you know that person and you have a very different relationship to that person than the people that are living far away in another country. So I really do believe that we need to ask ourselves these questions, and we need to come up with a plurality of answers. And for me, the first step is realizing that we need that plurality of different mechanisms, and not just one that will do everything.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in. I completely agree with that. And I'm also just wondering, beyond the philosophical elements, Dakotah, if this is something that you have already addressed in as far as you are in, sort of creating this model of co-equity.
I can't say that we really have. I mean, I think everything noted right now is awesome. I mean, I think the plurality of value exchanges makes a hell of a lot of sense. I think that's really like an important presupposition to hold, or at least to explore, because then it gets beyond like there's one system for everything. And then it really allows, I think, us to take a more ecosystemic approach across all of these amazing orgs that are building value systems. Like I think of, traditional Dream Factory token in what Awasa is doing, and it's awesome. And then there's like resource and seeds, and all of these are incredible, incredible networks, and the networks doing the work. And if we hold that the plurality is actually strength rather than one system to rule them all, then it just bridges that ability for us to work together more easily and readily. And for us, for like value exchanges, we've been just defaulting to fair market valuations and just paying people really well that's somehow tied to what people were already getting paid. And that is definitely not perfect. I mean, having a really cool internal system where we use some like blockchain voting, where we can, like Charlotte, like you're saying, where we can all like vote on the value exchanges, like that's dope. That would be a really cool tool set to have. And yeah, please.
There's a tool called coordinate, and you can already do that. You have a pool of tokens, and then you have that's why we do like at Traditional Dream Factory. We actually co-wrote a book called How to Build a Regenerative Village, and at the end we had like 100 tokens, and we all assigned the same amount of token to everyone. This one we could measure everyone's perceived contribution. But then I was thinking there's also maybe a flaw in this, because maybe someone who's more likable and more friendly, maybe you just want to tend to send them more token, even though it's not really their contribution so much. But no tool is perfect, but that's already like, one step in the right direction. So we're finding solution, and we're refining them as we go, yeah.
Right. Well, that's great to know. And this is what so excites me, is like everything is already being worked on or done. So yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'll look into that. It's cool.
What I love about this plurality is to also bring in the different needs that we all have, and say we can incorporate a universal basic income into that to make sure that all the base level needs are covered for everyone who's part of that network. And then beyond that, we have different currencies that cover for additional needs that might come into that. And we have currencies that are in place for that. And we can also take a lot of the services and goods that we provide for each other off of the market sphere and return more to a gift economy, where we realize, wow, we have abundance already. We don't need to charge for everything. I don't need to charge my friend for lending him my tent for a week, but I can just give it because I have the abundance anyways, and we can take it off from extracting from nature, extracting from community, and putting a face value on everything, but knowing that our true value is the trust that we have between each other, and that generates more generosity and trust, and we can create this upward spiral through that by not having to measure everything in quantitative ways. So I think there is a place for that, obviously, but there's also a sphere where it's also beautiful not to have to measure every transaction in tokens or money or any currency that is more than just trust and human connection.
Yeah, so in TDF, Traditional Dream Factory, we also have on our Discord channel the gratitude chat, so we can just send gratitude, and that I feel incentive just the gift economy, so because you just want to feel good about yourself, so once you just incentivize being a good person.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think like when we think about UBI, I know myself, I've struggled with two different things when it comes to UBI. One is for a long time I was trying to figure out how to make UBI work within the prevalence system, and I basically came to the conclusion that it doesn't work. into the present framework of economics. And then my next question was, well, what economic framework would UBI work in, right? And then it's when I figured out that it would work in like either with a time currency system or with a mutual credit system. And then you can have UBI. And my big aha moment was when I was listening to the podcast of it was an old recording by Alan Watt, the American philosopher, and he was explaining how money was just an idea. It's just it's virtual, right? It's just a tool, and going back to the efficiency thing, like each time we build a machine, we become more efficient. Well, that efficiency, that could be the foundational basis for UBI, right? So each time you build a machine, humanity becomes more efficient. And instead of extracting that efficiency just for a small number of people or the owners of the means of production, then you could relay that fundamental like efficiency and make it so it flows back as UBI, basically.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we're coming to the top of the hour, which is the time frame that we set for this conversation. And I feel like with many of the conversations we had, it's just the beginning of a much deeper conversation that will ripple out through the field and continue between us individually, or maybe next month when we come together again. But I feel that there's so much knowledge, so much wisdom and beauty in this group here. And there are some people who haven't spoken up. So I want to open the space on one hand for those who haven't shared anything yet that feel called to share even just a sentence of what's alive for you. And then I also want to hand it over to Shah, because Dakotah, you mentioned how important it is to come together in person and to connect. And Shah, you have this beautiful opportunity coming up with the Protopian. So maybe you can share a few words about that. But first, yeah, anyone who hasn't spoken yet, if you want to share anything. Oops, internet frozen again. I'll wait for a moment. Hopefully it comes back quickly.
And the really real-time organism in working parallel through dimensions. So like that was my reaction to that. And I'm also curious to follow the DAO space. TDF is a good example. How can we create these communities where it's not just one person who buys the land and then people join them, but like we encourage like hundreds of people to come together and contribute a part to the purchase of the land, and then the whole culture behind that is another topic. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I thought I would just express. Thank you.
I don't have anything particular to say, but it was very nice to hear you and see all of you. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah, likewise, I really enjoyed the conversation and to meet you, Dakotah. Looking forward to spending time at Protopia Convergence and diving in a little bit deeper and yeah, to be continued.
Susan, you want to share something? Okay, well, I guess, yeah. So thank you for the opportunity. So we're going to have Protopian Convergence from the 24th till the 28th of March in Red Park here. This beautiful activist community. And yeah, it's a 4-day event where we're going to explore the inner and outer changes to bring about a more pro-social and regenerative world. Because it's good to do project, but it's also about like the interchange. So we're gonna have talks and workshops and panels, but also we're gonna have fun. You know, we deal about like a serious subject, but at night we're gonna boogie and have late crazy fires and talks and make new friendships. So we all hope to see you there. It's in Arena, but
amazing. Excited to be there.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, one of the things I want to share is that in April and May, we're going to be hosting Cohere also at Rat Park. And it's really big, building off of what Charlotte's doing with the convergence, which I'm super stoked about. And it was really, really good to be here with you all and just really feel each of you and your incredible work. And I'm excited to learn more about what everyone's doing. And would love to invite you to join us in April and May. And then and I just put my contact information in the chat here. So there's my WhatsApp and my email. And reach out anytime. And looking forward to more.
Thank you so much for being here, Dakotah. Really excited to co-weave together and continue these conversations in person at Rat Park and at the Protopian. Alex, do you have anything else you want to share?
No, as always, it's a very interesting exploration. So thank you all for showing up and participating and being curious.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.
that was really nice. Looking forward to see you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.